and welcome to Conversations with Candidates. My name is Bruce Sampson, and I'll be your host. This programming is made possible by the Washington Parish Democratic Executive Committee and the Washington Parish NAACP.
In this episode, we'll be talking to DA Warren Montgomery. The list of questions that I'll be asking our candidate have been provided by the sponsors. And so without further ado,
DA Montgomery, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us today.
Hey, look, I'm glad to do it. And communication with the community is very, very important. And I'm here to serve the community. So it's a privilege.
Thank you, sir. Well, if it's okay with you, we'll just jump right into the questions.
Yes, sir.
Alrighty. So the first question is, for the benefit of the viewing audience, which cases are handled by the district attorney?
Okay. The district attorney in the 22nd Judicial District. And the 22nd Judicial District is Washington Parish and St. Tammany Parish. The district attorney enforces state laws, criminal state laws. So anything that is a crime, the district attorney handles the enforcement of those laws. Likewise, and similarly, the district attorney also advises parish government and other parish agencies in boards and commissions. So unlike, let's say, Orleans Parish or Jefferson Parish or East Baton Rouge Parish, who only handle criminal matters, my office also advises and represents parish governments and boards and commissions, for instance, the school board in Washington Parish, on civil matters. But I know most of your questions are interested in, frankly, the majority of my work is on the criminal side of the house. I should also add that my office also enforces child support payments. We collect money on behalf of the state for child support payments. And that's something that it's not commonly thought of as the responsibility of the district attorney. But believe it or not, in Washington and St. Tammany parishes, we've collected over the last 5 years over $100 million in child support for children and families to provide a better life for them. So we do a lot of different things, but I know you want to ask me about the criminal side of the house, and we enforce state criminal laws.
Wow, that's incredible information, though. So my next question is actually, what are your plans for improving the DA's office, especially in Washington Parish?
Thank you. That's a great question. We've done a number of things already. We instituted a screening division, which takes the police reports and the information from the law enforcement agencies, Bogalusa Police Department, Franklinton Police Department, the Washington Parish Sheriff's Office. And we have put that into an electronic system so that we've been able to decrease the time from arrest to resolution of the case. And we've not only been able to decrease the time from arrest to resolution of the case, we've been able to make sure that if we don't have the evidence, let's get that person out of the criminal justice system as quickly as possible. And we've decreased the time from arrest to resolution about 18%. Now that's a number for both Washington and St. Tammany, but the point is it's faster from arrest to resolution. And that's important because if you decrease that time, then you're housing people in the parish jail for a lesser period of time. And that saves parish government money. And that's an important consideration. Justice is important, but making justice efficient is important. And the screening division also makes sure that the appropriate charges are made in a case. So that, for instance, someone may be arrested for a minor offense, but after further investigation by my office, we find that it's a more serious offense. So we may upgrade the charges, or we may find that someone was arrested for a very serious offense, but after further review and investigation, we find that it's a less serious offense, in which case we would reduce the charges that we would formally bring against the accused person. And of course, there are times when someone is arrested and we find out later on that through facts and circumstances, listen, that person shouldn't have been arrested or shouldn't have been charged with a crime by the sheriff. That rarely happens, but it does happen. And it's important that we have the right people in the criminal justice system, and we don't charge people who are innocent or for whom we have insufficient evidence to convict them with a crime. And what we want to continue to do is to improve on that, make small changes and tweak it, and we have tweaked it, and we continue to improve and reduce that time. Some of the other things we've done is we had a fresh start program in which people were able to get their records, their criminal records expunged, particularly the misdemeanor criminal records expunged, so they could go on and get a job, they could go on and get housing, et cetera, and go on with their lives. And that is a program that I implemented during my administration, and that's helped many, many people. We have another program that's being started just this very month on October 31st. It's called a warrant clinic. And let's assume, for instance, that someone got a traffic ticket and they failed to show up at the courthouse in Franklinton for a traffic ticket. Well, a warrant would be issued for their arrest because they failed to show up, or it might have been issued for their arrest because they failed to show up, or for a misdemeanor. Some sort of a misdemeanor, they failed to show up. Maybe they were afraid to show up. Maybe they didn't have the money to pay the fine, et cetera, or maybe they're just being willfully disobedient. Well, what we're going to let people do is show up on October 31st in Covington, Louisiana at Peter Atkins Park between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. And we're going to let them resolve that outstanding warrant, and whatever the fine is, whatever the fee is, resolve it at that point in time. Because right now they're driving around with an arrest warrant out for them. Maybe they know it, maybe they don't know it. And if they do know it, maybe they're afraid to come into court because the fines and the fees are so great, and they're afraid I'm going to come to court and I'm going to be arrested because a warrant's out for me. Well, this is going to permit them to come in and resolve their outstanding criminal liability and get that warrant recalled and become whole with the criminal justice system. So we have a lot of projects that we have done in the past, and we have projects like this warrant clinic that we're implementing right now. And as we go along, we find new projects all the time that help people navigate the criminal justice system. And I can talk on and on about all the things we've done. We have a veterans court program, a sobriety court program, a drug court program, a reentry program, and the veterans court program was something I implemented. And we're constantly looking for new ways to hold people accountable, but not necessarily incarcerate them. Let's get people to change their behavior, if we can, without incarceration. If incarceration is necessary, well, that's an alternative, but that's not my first alternative. My first alternative is let's get these people back behaving the proper way and getting restitution for the victims of their crimes.
That's great. That's actually a perfect segue into my next question, which you may have just answered, which is, what are your views on nonviolent offender incarceration?
All right. Well, I've learned after being DA for 6 years that I'm a little bit like the high school disciplinarian. In other words, you don't meet me unless something's gone wrong. Now, the high school disciplinarian, his purpose is not to kick people out of school, which is, so to speak, sending people to jail. Okay. The purpose of the high school disciplinarian is to keep the kid in school, but change that student's behavior so that student is no longer disruptive in class. The student is no longer stopping other people from learning. So what I try to do is not incarcerate people if I can change their behavior. I don't want to kick them out of school. I want them to graduate from school. I want them to go on and be contributing members of society. However, I reserve the right, when someone is disruptive on a continuous basis, or the disruption on one time is so serious that, yeah, I'll send somebody to jail. I'll kick them out of school if that's what's required. But I would rather not kick them out of school. I'd rather not send them to jail. So you mentioned nonviolent offenders. How about drug dealing? you can make the argument that drug dealing is nonviolent, but drug dealing, selling drugs in our community, is selling poison into our community. People overdose on those drugs. People take those drugs and commit violent acts. So there are crimes such as drug dealing, which on their face appear nonviolent, but they contribute to violence in our community. Or let's say someone who burglarizes homes over and over and over again. And if you've ever been the subject of a home burglary, you get up, you go to work, and you come home, or you go away for the weekend and you come home and your house has been ransacked, people have broken into your house, that's traumatizing. Even though no one's committed a violent offense on you, you feel psychologically like you have been violated. So there are some nonviolent offenses where if that person doesn't correct their behavior, I'm going to send them to jail. So I prefer to keep people out of jail, whether it's violent or nonviolent. But if your actions are going to contribute to disorder and disruption in our society, then I'm going to put you in jail. I'll give you another example. There are shootings that take place. People take weapons and they shoot them into the air at night in Bogalusa and in other areas of Washington Parish. We had some young men who were driving along in the Mount Hermon area, and they were shooting weapons at mailboxes. And some of the bullets actually went into somebody's house. Now, was that a violent offense? No one was hurt. Okay. But that was a terrorist offense. People were scared to death because bullets were being shot indiscriminately. So even though it was nonviolent, those perpetrators went to jail. They got jail time because it was so disruptive to our community. All of us, Bruce, you and I, we have the right to live in our homes peaceably. And if someone is going to create, even if it's not a violent act, if it's going to disrupt our lives to that extent and potentially be violent, that person needs to be taken out of our community and until they decide to change their behavior. So generally speaking, that's my drawing, my line of demarcation is not violence versus nonviolence. Is this person disrupting our lives and making it impossible for you and I to work, go to church, raise our families, and live in peace.
Understood. My next question is, how are you addressing the problem of inequitable incarceration in minority communities?
Well, there's a number of ways to look at that issue, because if most of the crimes are being committed by Caucasians, then you know what? I don't care whether you're a Caucasian or not, I need to prosecute you. And it may appear inequitable that, for instance, I don't know, the population in Washington Parish is, let's say, 70% Caucasian and 30% African American. Well, if Caucasians are committing 90% of the crimes, they should be prosecuted 90% of the time. And if, let's say, Latinos are 5% of the population and they're committing 20% of the crimes, they should be prosecuted commensurate with the level of criminal activity. So I want to prosecute people based on their actions, not based on the color of their skin, their ethnicity, their religion, etc. So that's the first thing. And I set that out, and that's what that screening department does. It makes sure that, in fact, we're prosecuting people based on their criminal activity. Now, another thing that you do is you try to diversify your staff. And our staff on a racial basis is very similar to our overall community. When you have Washington and St. Tammany parishes, our staff, we have a number of African Americans. The chief of our misdemeanor division is an African American. So, yes, you can have racial bias, even African American against African American. But if you diversify your staff, you're less likely to have that. So we have the screening department, which evaluates the case based on the evidence and the action of the offender. And then we have people in our staff who are in fact African Americans, who I think are less likely to discriminate or be prejudiced against other African Americans. And those are two ways that I try to make sure that we hold people accountable based on their actions and not on their ethnicity.
Great. What are some of the problems you've encountered in the Washington Parish judicial system?
I haven't encountered, well, in the judicial system, of course, it's the judges. You have to have a good judge, and I think we have good judges. The clerk of court has to operate efficiently, and I think Johnny Crane, the clerk of court, does a great job. We have a little difficulty in Washington Parish in getting jurors to come to court and getting enough jurors to come to court. And so I would encourage your listeners, if you are asked to be a juror, please show up for jury duty. We need good, honest citizens to be there so we have fair, speedy trials for those accused of trials. And that's a very important consideration, is getting the right people. Now, of course, we've had this COVID situation, and we haven't had a trial in Washington Parish since March, and that's not good. We're hopeful that we will have another trial and that we'll have our first trial in December. We're gunning for December to have our first criminal felony trial. But getting citizen participation as jurors and grand jurors has been a little bit of a challenge. Another element is just the law enforcement, the sheriff's office, the police departments. Those departments need to be properly funded. We have a lot of fine people in Washington Parish in law enforcement, but if they don't have the resources themselves to solve the crimes, to investigate the crimes properly, then it's a challenge for me as the prosecutor, because I don't have the evidence to prosecute the crime properly. And that's a very, very important consideration, is proper funding for law enforcement. But I think overall, law enforcement in Washington Parish is working very hard, doing the best they can to try to get us the evidence that we need so we can prosecute those crimes properly. But I do believe that funding for law enforcement is a challenge. And lastly, I would just ask your listeners, there are so many good police officers out there, deputy sheriffs. If you see someone in law enforcement, thank that person for the job they do. They have a tough job. And as I said, they're not always properly funded. And all of us know what it's like to have a job where you don't have the resources to get your job done like you would like to get it done. And so they need some thanks and some encouragement. And I think that would be helpful to the safety of our community, just to thank our law enforcement personnel.
Great. Why do you think we have a revolving door, or appear to have a revolving door, of repeat offenders with serious crimes in Washington Parish?
There's a term I want to define. It's called recidivism. Recidivism means how many people go to jail and then within 5 years commit another crime. And that's what you're referring to when you talk about a revolving doors. In other words, we convict somebody of a serious crime and they go to jail for whatever time it is, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and then they come out and reoffend. What is going on there? Well, first off, someone who commits a crime who commits a serious crime may need jail time, and most often does need jail time in order for justice to be achieved, for those people to be held accountable, for the public to know that they're safe. For all those reasons, they often need to go to jail. Now, everybody who goes to jail is going to come out of jail unless they've got a life sentence or unless they get the death penalty. Everybody who's going to go to jail is going to come out of jail. So the question that we have to ask ourselves is, are they going to come out of jail as a better person, or are they going to go to jail and learn to be a better criminal? So we have to work on the end of the Department of Corrections end to give those people an opportunity to change their lives And many people do change their lives in jail, and they come out to be contributing citizens. And we don't want to overlook that. We don't want to overlook that. So one of the things that we have done is implement these programs that I just mentioned to you, the drug court program, the veterans court program, the sobriety court program, where people are given an opportunity before going to jail to change their lives. And if they don't, then we give them a serious amount of time. Now, I don't think in Washington Parish we have as serious a problem as you're referring to about people going to jail. And by the way, let me back up just a little bit. On those drug court programs, et cetera, the recidivism rate is 10 to 20%. If you just send somebody to jail, the recidivism rate is almost 50%. So to the extent we can put people into these special programs, we're going to have a lower recidivism rate. And I, frankly, these people who commit serious offenses, I give them serious time. Sometimes they get life sentences for these serious offenses. And so I can tell you, as far as I'm concerned, as your district attorney, we don't have a revolving door for serious offenses. I send them to jail and they're there for a long time. And I only do that when they commit serious offenses. I try to give people an opportunity, but if they don't take that opportunity to reform their lives, then I'm going to send them to jail for a long time. Now, there have been some reform movements in the state legislature, which have taken away some of the authority that I have to give people lengthy sentences. So now someone may get a 10-year sentence, but only do 2 years in jail. They're sentenced to 10 years and they only do 2 years. That's not enough time to get them to change their behavior. So that's the fault of the legislature. And specifically, we have a great program that was started in Washington Parish, and it was started by one of your judges from Washington Parish, Judge Rusty Knight, and it's called the Reentry Program. And that's for people who have committed a series of offenses, nonviolent, non-sex crimes, but series of offenses, and we're preparing to give them a 20-year sentence. In fact, to get into this program, you have to have a minimum 10-year sentence. But what we do is they plead guilty, we send them to Angola, and they spend up to 2 years getting training in mental health, training in drug addiction, training in vocational areas, for instance, air conditioning, heating, welding, et cetera, et cetera. And after 2 years, if they graduate from the program, they're released from Angola. And the recidivism rate of that program is approximately 10%. So instead of the revolving door of 50%, it's reduced to 10%. And that's a great program, and it's a credit to a Washington Parish Judge, Rusty Knight, who's been a leader in this program. So, I try not to have a revolving door. I try to give people the serious time that they need, but the legislature has taken a little of that authority from my hands. And of course, I try to put people in programs so that recidivism rate is not the 50% if you're just sentenced to jail, but maybe 10%. And then those 9 out of 10 people come back and become contributing citizens in our society and help us build our society. And unfortunately, like anything, there's 1 out of 10 in that reentry program that's caught committing another crime within 5 years. And those people, we give the most severe sanction we can.
Understood. Well, tell me, what are your views on the juvenile justice system, and how does it contribute to lifelong criminal behavior?
All right, that's a great question, another great question. And you have to look at how people come into contact with the juvenile justice system. I mean, the truth is, our mom and dad, our parents, are the ones who kind of keep us on the road, as they say, out of the ditches, right? If we can just keep driving on the road and out of the ditches. And the first line of defense in that are our parents, our mom and dad. The next line of defense, so to speak, might be extended family members who help keep us out of the ditches of criminal activity. And beyond that, we have our teachers at school and coaches. How many of us have been positively impacted by our teachers and our coaches? And so we have these, for lack of a better word, these guardrails of all these things. Our church community helps us. But what happens when all those guardrails don't work and we end up in the ditch as a young person and you're involved in the juvenile justice system? Well, we've had a serious problem in Louisiana, and that our juvenile justice system has been underfunded. It hasn't had the resources. And so our juvenile justice system, instead of being a place where young people go and get the reform that they really need, in many instances, it's almost been a jail for juveniles. And juveniles are never going to self-correct in a jail setting. They need the structure, and they deserve the structure of the special needs that a young person has, where there's still an opportunity to change their behavior. And this isn't easy. I'm not trying to point fingers or blame, but it's not easy to change a 15-year-old or a 16-year-old or a 17-year-old who's decided they want to live a life of crime. And so I would be lying to you if I said all 15, 16, and 17-year-olds can be saved. Some of them cannot. It is a challenge, but we're only going to solve the juvenile crime problem in Washington Parish if we're willing to fund those means, so to speak, those facilities where they can get the help that they need. And those of you who have 15, 16, and 17-year-old children, or even forget about 15, 16, how about 12, 13, and 14-year-old children who are not headed in the right direction? You know how difficult it can be, particularly if you're a single parent, a single mom. It is difficult to help that child and get them on the right. So we need to fund our juvenile justice system appropriately. If we do that, we will have less crime down the road. We'll have less people who will end up going to jail when they're 18, 19, and 20. So it's imperative that we fund those systems properly. We've made some progress in that regard, but we haven't, honestly and frankly, and I'm not pointing any fingers, we haven't funded that system well enough. Now, let me just say, however, send some kudos. We have a facility called the Florida Parishes Juvenile Detention Center. And that's for these young people who are being held pre-trial for juvenile charges, who maybe have committed a violent act and they're being held pre-trial. That facility has been well funded, and it's doing great service to our community pre-trial for those young people. We've been able to take these dangerous young people who have maybe have committed a violent act or some other serious crime act, and we'll be able to put them pre-trial into that facility. It's located outside Hammond, between Covington and Hammond. And I want to thank the people of Washington Parish, because we pay for that. I say we pay through our property taxes for that Florida Parishes Juvenile Detention Center. It takes kids from Washington, St. Tammany, and also the other Florida parishes, Tangipahoa, St. Helena, et cetera. So in that regard, we're doing a good job with the juvenile justice system. Pre-trial, we need to improve it post-trial and fund those facilities responsibly.
Well, DA, those are the questions that I've been provided to ask you. I'd like to provide you with an opportunity now to say anything that you'd like to our viewership and to the voters out there.
Well, it has been a privilege and an honor to be your DA. I can tell you I've worked hard. I can tell you we have a great team of people who, by the way, don't, to the best of my knowledge, they don't discriminate on the basis of color, ethnicity, religion, income, etc. We try to treat everybody fairly and equitably and the same. And so I'm very proud of the staff. I'm very proud of these things that I mentioned to you, the screening division. the increase in domestic violence prosecutions, the Fresh Start program, this warrant clinic that's going to happen on October 31st. We made a whole bunch of changes that I think have made our community safer, but we need to and will continue to improve. And lastly, I would say, ladies and gentlemen, go vote. Your vote is important. Good people running for public office need your vote. I need your vote. Go vote, and God bless.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. This has been a conversation with candidates with DA Warren Montgomery. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here and to speak to the viewership and to potential voters out there. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Bruce. God bless.